What a year it was in 2025, and our friends at the Ginther Group want to begin the new year by saying thank you to the nearly 400 members of the Triad that bought or sold a home with them last year. And now that the holidays are in our rearview mirror, the last thing you need in your life is more stress. For those of you in the market, you should know that 80% of Ginther Group clients that left a 5-star review indicated that their agent made the process less stressful or even enjoyable. So what are your real estate goals in 2026? Whether you're trying to achieve them right now or maybe later in the year, call the Ginther Group today at 336-283-8689, or you can visit their website at theginthergroup.com. Even if it's not the right time to buy or sell, that's okay. You can still meet with them about your plans so that you can work with a team you can trust to have you ready when the time is right. That's 336-283-8689 or theginthergroup.com. Call or visit the Ginther Group today.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first 2026 episode with our certified financial planner, Jennifer Johnson, with Three Magnolias Financial Advisors in Winston-Salem. Jennifer, we may have overthought this one in terms of podcast topics. We always try to maybe say, every year around this time, we tend to talk about this, whether it's, the year end, and we say, well, here's all the different things you should remember to do before the end of the year. But we pivoted from that and we talked about challenges within the healthcare system. And so for this one, it said, okay, well, we can go to the obvious route, which is what we expect from the financial world, what we expect or at least predict from the financial markets. But it seems like we always do some version of that. And sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. And I can't think of something that's more appropriate for us to talk about with other than some things that you and others in your profession are keeping your eye on for 2026. So do I have that right in terms of the summary of our conversation today?
Yeah, I think so. I know a lot of times around January, we'll be talking about New Year's resolutions because people generally that's one or two in terms of the top New Year's resolutions is for people to kind of get reorganized financially. But I'm also fielding a ton of questions about what's going to happen in the market, this year, mostly meaning the stock market, but what's going to happen to, my investments. And they generally go from one extreme or the other. And I'll see if you've heard similar comments or read different things. And a lot of it is around AI, and you really can't talk about the markets lately without talking about AI or the economy without talking about AI, I think. And it's either I've got folks wondering if this AI surgence is a bubble that's about to pop and blow up in our faces, or it's going to be this incredible, transformative thing that leads to growth like we have never seen before. So I get those kind of two extreme sort of questions or stances maybe. And I just feel like it's on people's minds.
And I would imagine, like many things, when you're talking about two extremes, the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Well, yeah, as folks that maybe have heard me before give this very unexciting advice and take on most things. Rarely is it the euphoria that we think it is, and then also rarely is it the incredible destruction too. I mean, we talked last year, it feels like a long time ago, but if you remember last spring, when the tariffs were in the news, I think you and I did a topical discussion around that. And we had a very similar where it was like, okay, these tariffs are just going to lead to complete destruction, or it's going to push the U.S. to this incredible dominance and just everything's gonna be great, and the truth is somewhere in between, we're finding, and I think that's likely to be the case here. Though I do think it's interesting, how there's an emotional part of investing, right, which we've talked about a bit before, and maybe the most important thing that we'll talk about, and we'll first, of course, explain kind of what's going on, maybe a little bit, and what we see and why in the market, but I think the most important takeaway is what should you do or not do, right? Because these times in particular, I think where there's a lot of news headlines, a lot of emotion maybe around these things. People make very emotional and sometimes regretful decisions.
Yeah, and to me, in terms of what I see out there, it's hard to know what's real and what's not real. And that's a whole different conversation when it comes to
Right.
AI. But as an example, I'm doing what a lot of people do sometimes, which is you scroll through your social media feed and I stumble upon an ad for this person who's talking about they were able to generate $50,000 of income working part-time 10 hours a week just because of
Yeah.
an AI solution that's out there that is
Right.
focused on financial markets. And I don't, again, I don't know if it's true. In most cases,
Mhm.
something like that is too good to be true.
Right.
Um, but
Right.
I know that I know enough that the AI technology is growing at a pace where, yeah, whether it's you're investing in the companies that are behind it or whether you're utilizing the technology to help generate um, and create your own system for generating wealth,
Yeah.
um, it's out there, and a lot of people are using it. A lot of people are talking about it, and so whether it's a bubble or not,
Yeah.
it's absolutely something that people are paying more and more attention to as a way to generate dollars.
Yeah, that's right. And I think when we think about the markets, we're, the way AI has affected those is I think a couple fold. I mean, one, certainly small businesses like you mentioned, you'd see people leveraging that maybe to make income. But at larger scales, larger businesses are looking at how they can adopt it. And that creates a couple things. I mean, one, if even if you're not a tech company per se, if you're able to adopt some AI tools and get more productivity, out of those workers without hiring more people, that should lead to a more profitable company, right? And so when we look back at like 2025's market experience, we really felt like AI was a big driver, not just because the companies that weren't specifically in those fields, making chips or, doing other things that supplying energy, to that specific industry, that went up. Though certainly you had some tremendous gains in that area. You also saw gains kind of in the broader, market where companies were able to get more productivity out of workers. And that was a really, I think, unique thing to where you could see, okay, this kind of bled throughout the economy, right? So that also has made people wonder that because there is still this euphoria of like, because you hear these different comments about like what it's going to be able to do for us, right? Like it's going like to do all my customer service, for example, right? Like, and so you won't really need customer service people anymore. You won't need admin people because it's gonna do my calendar for me, right? It's gonna Adam take all your show notes, probably. Like it's gonna do all these things and do it on this incredible scale that we have never seen before and like kind of make us all more productive. And I think we're seeing that to some extent, right? I mean, we're probably all, or most people listening are probably using some kind of AI tool for a time saver. How much can it really replace workers has been part of the interesting question, I think. And one of the reasons I think people are somewhat worried that companies are overspending in this area and they won't recoup that. Does that make sense? In terms of like the larger economy, maybe, and the impact of that.
Yeah, so I guess when you tee up the conversation by saying that you're getting a lot of questions from people about what you're watching going into this year and AI companies or companies spending on AI technology
Right.
are at the center of that. Are you looking to see a, you know, what AI companies are out there that people are putting their investments into, or B, the companies that are spending outrageous dollars to
Yeah.
to utilize this technology that may lead to higher profits down the line, may not be immediately. I'm not sure, but I'm curious to know if that's kind of where your eyes go when it comes to this very broad
Yeah.
topic in terms of your profession.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's two things going on. Is that one, looking at is there any near term, or do we see any impact on the profitability of these companies now, or do we expect that in the future? Because just as a reminder for folks too, when people invest in stocks, they're investing in the future, right? I mean, people are buying that in hopes that your company sells more widgets next year than it did this year, such that your value and that your piece of that company goes up, and or they pay you a dividend, some income, from that sell of widgets, right? So you get a return that way. So the market's always forward looking in that way. So it's always like, okay, is this in significant, and in some cases, really significant dollars going toward these things? How does that pay off in the future? And that's not an exact science, right? Like, so you may, and there's going to be varying opinions about whether or not that's worth it, depending upon the company and the investment they might be making. I think the one of the key things is for people to know that I do think it's here to stay. I think
Yeah.
that ship has sailed. I don't think it's something where trying to think of an example of something we thought was going to be life changing that just never came to fruition. But I do think it's here to stay. I mean, my personal opinion is we may be like overestimating a bit, what AI is going to do near term in terms of replacing people or automating things. In part because maybe of our human reluctance to adopt it. I don't know if you've been behind somebody like at a McDonald's or something trying to use the touch screen.
Oh,
Like,
I've seen myself try to use something like that, and it's
right,
I don't
right.
I don't
I
prefer
mean,
it.
it doesn't, or some sort of service chatbot, you almost always end up calling in to talk to a human if you have any sort of significant, customer service challenge. But I do think it's, certainly here to stay. So, the question will be like how much return dollars kind of come back to those companies. Now, it's not the only story, certainly, as we go into 2026, but it is a big driver, right? I mean, I don't think you can really, sort of talk about what you think the market's going to do without mentioning that. But I will say too, if you look back kind of at last year as an example too, and part of the reason, I think I'm getting some of these questions about a bubble is we've had largely two really solid years in the market too. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, right? And so most people I think understand the market doesn't always go up, right? I mean, you don't have to be an expert to know like you should expect some ups and downs in the market. And thus when you have two pretty quiet years with double digit gains, I think that's also causing some nervousness. I don't know if you would agree with that, Adam.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I mean, you would know better than I, but if we're coming off solid years, like you said, we know that it's always I don't know if roller coaster is the right word, but we know that
Yeah,
it has its ebbs and flows, and so maybe
right.
there's some trepidation there. I guess one of my concerns, and depends on your perspective of this, is AI makes things not necessarily easier, but it can make things
Mhm.
more efficient. It can provide convenience, but a lot of times you end up paying for that convenience. And so while there are
Right,
some free tools and low cost tools out there, we know that um, people sometimes will pay a premium to get DoorDash to deliver food rather than drive to the restaurant and get takeout, you know?
right,
And so
right.
there are conveniences that get passed on to the consumer. And it's
Mhm.
not the tariff conversation that we had from last year, but I think there are some similarities in the long run.
Right.
So I guess I worry a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think there's because there's competing things here, right, with inflation too, right? So you need to talk about that, like what how prices kind of go up when you think about the economy as well. I mean, I think from a corporate standpoint, if it's a like, okay, you're gonna hire a human to take my order at the restaurant, or you're gonna have some sort of AI assistant that you talk into or interact with on a screen. I think from a business owner or a corporate standpoint, they're even if they're making a big investment in creating or purchasing, as you said, the cost of this AI tool, they're going to see that over time as more cost effective than hiring a human who has HR concerns and gets sick and all that stuff. It's just a question of like how much does that really impact their ability to do more. And you're right, the cost of these can be really significant. The good news is, thinking back, I mean, we actually did. It's not just a all the money's being thrown at like a few companies either. Even though you are seeing chip makers and things make it, an incredible amount of money. The broader economy, I think we had something like 80+% of the S&P 500 reported good or better than expected earnings last year. So it is a broad like growth in the economy, and part of that certainly has to do with AI spend, right? I think some of the spending, if that's encouraging to people, they're investing in the future for largely with this AI spend, but they're already seeing profits now. I think due to a couple of reasons. I mean, one is that the consumer, even though we've suffered through some price hikes, we're still largely buying. I mean, we're fussing about what stuff costs, right? I mean, and I do it too. You're just like, gosh, that seems like a lot, but you're still buying it, right? I mean, in some cases, you don't have any choice; you've got to eat and whatnot. But um, consumers still spending, and so we're still seeing growth, and the tariff impact wasn't quite as severe. We already talked about it before. Like the tariff impact wasn't as severe as what was feared, right? So you're seeing were some higher costs as a result of that, but in part, the businesses absorbed some of those costs, and then the consumer absorbed some of those, and we've continued to see growth for the rest of the year. And going into this year, I think expectations are you see the market do maybe a high single digit return to maybe a low double digit return, both due to the fact that we see those earnings continue there, and largely supported by the consumer, certainly of continuing if they can continue to tolerate that. And also, it certainly doesn't appear as if anybody's slowing down the AI investment from what I have seen. There's still a lot of believers.
During the wintertime, nothing warms the heart like something sweet and savory from Dewey's Bakery. This time of year, let our wonderful sponsors at Dewey's help you celebrate all those special moments, like football parties or Valentine's Day treats for that special someone in your life. Super Bowl themed pull apart cupcakes, heart shaped cakes, whatever you can dream up, Dewey's can make it a reality. Just make sure you visit local.deweys.com. That's local.deweys.com to place your order. Or visit any of their 3 Triad area locations immediately in Winston-Salem at Thruway and Ronalda Manor, plus one in Greensboro at Friendly Shopping Center. So make this winter special for the ones you love and others with Dewey's Bakery, home of Free Cake Square Monday all year round. Dewey's, celebrate every day. Slightly different lane here as it relates to this conversation. We know that there's a fear out there, and I don't know at this point what professions are immune to it, that people think is AI going to replace my job. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
there's a retirement angle
Mhm.
to this to say,
Right. Yeah.
do people
Yeah.
need to speed up their retirement? Are people worried about this? I don't know. Is there a conversation
Yeah.
to be had
No, that
about
is. Mhm.
how whether or not their job could be replaced by AI? I
Yeah,
don't I don't
absolutely.
ever want to see that happen to people out there.
For sure.
but we know it's a reality. And does that affect the way people kind of plan for their future?
Yeah, I think so because you're getting to my next sort of point, which is, with some caveats. So we certainly see them, consensus is we see growth this year, right? Caveat to that, or we'll rule two things really. One being the employment situation, because if we saw last spring, as we had people come, graduates come out of college, right? They had a real tough time finding that first job. I don't know if people remember that, but hiring has been pretty lackluster. And in part, it's because I think companies were like, look at these AI tools, right? We're making an investment in that. We've already got a workforce with maybe 3, 4, 5 years of experience. We're going to give them an AI tool and see what they can do before we go hiring a bunch of new people. That's been good for the earnings, right? So that's part of the reason that we saw companies be more profitable, right? Because they were still able to do a lot, produce maybe as much, serve as many people, and not hire as many folks as maybe they would have in years past. And the tariffs weren't quite as devastating as we thought. So that has led to a good thing. The challenge is, as you pointed out, do people begin to worry about their jobs, right? And so that's a real fear. And that if people start to get concerned about, oh, maybe this is really an amazing thing, and it can be your financial advisor, instead of, caring if I'm human or not, you just talk to a bot or whatever, or a large learning model, language learning model. And then so that you take your advice from that AI person. That AI person's not the right word because it's not a person, is it? But that AI, robot, if you will, and you don't have a human advisor. So the more people I think become concerned about that possibility, the more the consumer may start to slow down, right? And so I mentioned earlier, we're fussing about higher prices. We're still spending because largely the job market's been pretty stable. But if we get to a situation where we see, hiring really slow, we see, maybe even some layoffs. We did see some of that, last year, but not to the level where it hurt the consumer. Because remember, the consumer drives like 2/3 or 3/4 of the economy, depending upon what metric, you use. And so that's been a positive thing. That's something I think we really need to watch, though, going into 2026. So a lot of positive things, but that's also been one of the negatives. And the data that we're getting, we talked about this before, data on employment largely comes from the government. The government was shut down last fall for a good bit, and I think there's some concern, like, okay, how accurate is the data? Because you also had a lot of the unemployment numbers were federal workers, right? And so you had these sort of wonky numbers. It's hard to kind of get your arms around that, I think, going into this year.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you made to kind of carry it forward a couple more steps, which is if if AI has an impact on the job market, whether it's the inability for people to find new jobs or people's jobs just being outright eliminated as a result of it,
Right.
now you're affecting household income, and in
Right.
turn you're affecting consumer spending because
That's right.
people have less of an ability to spend the kind of money that they were before if their jobs are being impacted. And so what could that impact be if consumer spending takes a significant hit
Yeah.
as a result
Yeah.
of this wave?
Well, I think that could easily cause a recession. People are not necessarily calling for that right away, but I think that's something we have to watch, be it real or imaginary too. Like, so, I mean, you don't have to actually lose your job, right? You just have to be like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I couldn't get another job if I lost this one, or maybe this job does get eliminated. So far, I think those fears have been largely contained because, again, you're seeing the consumer continue to spend. As long as that continues to happen, I think that will mean fairly resilient markets for the year. But that's something we have to keep an eye on because that's the trade off with the AI, right? It's like, okay, largely it's replacing what a worker would do, right? And so like the rose-colored glasses would say, well, you'll still need people, like they'll just do more, right? And so that's how companies will leverage it. But if it becomes a fear of like, oh, maybe they don't need people at all, or they don't need me or my department or even whatever service maybe this company is, if people get nervous enough about that and they slow down their spending, even if they haven't yet lost their job, that can lead to a downturn in the market. Does that make sense? Because we're looking ahead, right? The market's kind of looking ahead and trying to see, what's going on. So hopefully that's that psychology. It's kind of a manifest destiny, right? Where if you become fearful about your job and fearful about the economy such that you don't spend normally, you create a negative economy, if that makes sense, be it
Yeah.
real or not. It becomes real, if you get a large enough herd of people. So that's one of the things that we'll have to kind of watch in the trade-offs. Now, I'll tell you kind of my personal thoughts if you're interested,
Of course.
in that much like my unexciting advice about the tariffs too, like I think, AI is going to be in a very similar space and that it's going to do a lot. It's going to be like really transformative as we've already kind of seen the seeds of that. I'm hesitant to think that it's going to revolutionize our world in such a short time frame, right? Like, because I think part of it is you have to have humans adopt these things in such a significant way. And I think it's a pretty low barrier to, instead of maybe doing, a web search, you go to a chat GBT or something like instead. Like that's not a big change for most people, but if it's really like your doctor is now an AI bot, like how comfortable are you with that, right? Like most people, maybe in 20 years, maybe, like I don't know, but I just think there's just a tremendous hesitancy. And then watching people, like, we all have probably older relatives and things, like navigate the technology now. Like, how many people can really interact and use an AI assistant. I'm skeptical. That's my opinion of like this revolutionary, change. And I think it's so interesting too, like just the headlines are constantly coming out. Um, just in the last couple days, and I think you might have been alluding to this earlier, Adam. Elon Musk came out and basically said, like, hey, in like 10 years, you won't even need to save for retirement because AI is going to bring in such incredible abundance and you know, AI is going to be doing all our work for us. And like, we're just not even going to have to worry, about household chores or money or anything. Well, I mean, to me, that's like pie in the sky. I realize he's a genius. I understand that. I've been told that anyway. I guess I should say he's not a personal friend. Like I don't know him. But I'm just like, wow, that's really uh that really just seems so far out. I mean, and he's talking like 10 to 20 years, like nobody has to worry about retirement, I guess, because these things are doing everything for us, which was so interesting to me because I thought years ago he said it would kill us all. I don't know if you remember that, but he said AI might turn and kill all of humanity. I don't know if you're I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure
Yeah. That,
that
that
was his
sounds that
stance
sounds
until he
familiar.
started
Yeah.
to develop like his own AI company. But it's so hilarious to me, the incredible swings of what it's going to do, but whether it will just bring about this Eden and euphoria or it's going to kill us, like one or the other. Like it seems like most people are in the camp of. And I'm in the middle. Like I'm just very staunch in the middle, if that helps,
Yeah.
kind of where I stand, I
I'm
guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. Um, I don't I don't think we're headed there in the next 10 to 20 years. I think the advancement's going to be amazing in terms of just
Right.
what it's capable of.
Right.
Will it make a significant impact on our lives? Likely. But is it going to remove our complete uh need for work to make money? For some people, yes, but for the vast majority, probably not.
Yeah,
My approach on AI is, do I use it? Yes, I use it for convenience and efficiency from my own perspective. Yeah,
sure,
do I have
sure.
AI help write podcast show notes? Absolutely. It's not
Yeah,
taking anybody's job away. I didn't pay anybody to do it before. I was doing it myself, and it saves
yeah,
me some time.
yeah. And you can spend
That's the
time.
way, that's
Yeah,
generally my approach when it comes to this.
right, right. Yeah. And that's my hope and thought that we'll see more there. And let's be real too, a lot of industries are struggling to find workers. As
Mhm.
we've said before, one of the limitations of the economy, is struggling to find the workers they need. And so I think this could certainly be part of that solution and be a positive in that way, whether it's customer service or if it's like a robotics and actually physically doing things. So it'll be really exciting to see though. I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think we're still, so I'll leave people with a few takeaways, and people are probably not surprised. I will still suggest you save for retirement. I don't think it's going to be that world changing where you literally don't need to do anything, but it is going to be a very interesting and ever evolving time for us that we live in.
I think you and I are on the same page there. It's going to be wild to see what it's capable of. Um, but yeah, let's not bet on that in terms of betting on our future rather than just continuing to do the steps we've taken to make sure that we actually have the money to not work and not rely on other ways to get there.
Yeah, because I don't think they're going to do stuff for us for free, as you alluded
Nope.
earlier. Like I'm not sure how that would even work. And then hopefully they won't kill us. Like what was that movie, I, Robot, with Will Smith in
Yeah.
it, where they rose up and tried to kill everyone. So certainly it's our hope it's like in between. But I would tell people a few things, I guess, in closing. I mean, one is, as you've shared, and I'm in agreement too, that AI is really reshaping a lot and it's not going away. So it is something that will change and evolve our future, but it's inconsistent, right? And there's not going to be a smooth line, I think, in the development and implementation of this. So I would tell people in terms of it in an investment expectation, whether you're in those companies themselves that are in that industry or in some of these companies that are investing heavily into it in hopes of greater, productivity and profitability in the future, like expect volatility, right? Expect there to be times in which it looks like this is really paying off and then times in which this is really doubtful. And so just expect that to not be an ever steady line. I will say, I mean, again, we're expecting this to be a pretty good year in the market, as I said earlier, but know that it's unlikely to be a straight line. You need to be prepared for that. And I think it's going to be even more difficult to predict and time the market. We've talked about that before and like basic tenets of investing when we've talked about it on different shows, and that, sometimes people will try to time that moment just right, where you invest when the market's down and then you sell everything as the market rises. I think with all the change that we're experiencing, I think that is more challenging than ever. And I think markets move more quickly than ever, in part due to this technological advancement. So I would really caution people against, trying to time that right. I think that's a fool's errand.
Mhm.
But also, you don't want to get too overweight in these things, right? So I'll have people sometimes come in and they'll have, some of these this AI industry, or especially the tech industry even as a whole, if they've built their own investment strategy, they're just incredibly concentrated, if not that's all they own, right? And so there's real danger, in that. I think you've got to be balanced, as unexciting again as it is. And I would tell people also to rebalance, which is something I maybe haven't mentioned enough before, whereas maybe you started 2025 with, just to make the math easy, a portfolio that's 50% in the stock market and 50%, in the bond market or in a money market. And then at the end of the year, if you haven't rebalanced that to your original percentages, right now, you may be 70% in the stock market, right? Just because of how quickly and that rose. So if you don't periodically rebalance that back, all of a sudden you could be in a more risky portfolio than you realize. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm
Yep.
being clear on that, but
No, it does, because there's just nuance. There's nuance to all of this, and we started this conversation by discussing two extremes when it comes to the future of AI and the future of a lot of things, but it's nuanced, and that's why we're glad to have you on here to provide some of that perspective, and not necessarily just always taking one side or the other, but saying that these are the things you need to think about on both sides of it, and then at the end of the day, it comes down to it becomes very personal for someone in
it
terms of what's the
does.
right path.
It does, and that's why, of course, I'm an advocate of getting, personal advice, because it is. I think it's really challenging, on your own. It's especially if it's something maybe that you picked, you're real excited about it and it's really gone up. Like the idea of, maybe selling that or rebalancing is like hard,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
and especially when it's doing well, but you don't want to wait till it's in the toilet,
Right.
so it's kind of a tricky thing, which I think is helpful to get get professional advice, somebody that's, spending all day kind of thinking about these things and and encouraging you, reminding you to save, even though the future hopefully is bright. I think we're still going to need to save for our retirement. And then, last point, and then we'll conclude on this is if you're taking money out, let's say you're retired and you're taking money out of that, really exciting portfolio, or your kid's getting ready to go to school, you want to be aware of what's percentages coming out of there, right? Because I think sometimes in really good markets it hides the fact that you're taking a lot of money out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it may be like you're taking out 10% of that portfolio and expecting it to last 30 years. And when markets are, great, like it looks like that's going to work, but if you have a step back, it opens your eyes to some things. So it's a lot to think about. I
Yeah.
realize just kind of a lot to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you're here to give us all these things to think about, and people may still have questions about their own situation, but we know that if you go to the office of Three Magnolias Financial Advisors in Winston-Salem, you will speak to a human, a real life human,
Right.
and Jennifer is
Right.
one of many that are there to assist. So how can they get a hold of you in your office?
Yeah, that's right. All live human beings here in the office here. We're located in Winston-Salem too, so we're a local company right off Stratford Road. So you're welcome to come visit us. You can give us a call, and a human should answer. 99% of the time, we're at 336-701-1600. You check us out online at Three Magnolias with an S financialadvisors.com. So that's all spelled out. So check us out. If you want to talk to a person, let us know.
Yeah. I can tell you that you can't see her, but I can see Jennifer. She's a real person, and I've been to her office. There are not robots there. There are real
That's right.
humans that do great work. So, uh,
Well, yeah, and they can tell I'm not that smooth, so I'm definitely not a robot, right? Like I've got a country accent, a little bit of a stuffy nose, and it's you can probably tell it's too imperfect to be an robot.
relatable is what we
Yeah.
call it.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you
All
go.
right,
Thanks so
Jennifer.
much, Adam. I
Appreciate it.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Securities offered through Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Three Magnolias Financial Advisors, located at 110 Oakwood Drive, Suite 480, Winston-Salem, North Carolina 27103. Three Magnolias Financial Advisors and Private Client Services are not affiliated. Private Client Services is under separate ownership from any other named entity. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. All all economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. The market indices discussed are unmanaged. Additional risks are associated with international investing, such as currency fluctuations, political and economic stability, and differences in accounting standards. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only, and not necessarily those of private client services. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither private client services nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.